an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy.
You heard it there from Jack Smith, the special counsel. Um, a 45-page federal indictment of Donald Trump accuses the former president of 4 felony counts: conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. The twice impeached, 3-time indicted, and former president, who earlier this year was convicted by a civil jury of sexual assault, is currently the Republican frontrunner in the 2024 race. But he's been summoned to appear in court in Washington, D.C. at 4 p.m. on Thursday. It's the third time, as we noted, that Trump has been indicted on criminal charges. He has pleaded not guilty to all the charges in the 2 other cases, decrying the investigations as political witch hunts. He continues to insist that the 2020 vote was rigged, and speaking to ABC News on Tuesday, described the latest charges as a pile-on and election interference. How about that? It should be also should be noted that a 4th indictment is imminent, and that will come from Georgia, where Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis has been receiving racist hate mail. And the sheriff of Fulton County said that if Donald Trump were to be indicted in connection with efforts to overturn the 2020 election in that state, they're not giving him special treatment. Yes, he will be booked and photographed and perp walked like every other defendant. We're going to talk about all of that this morning. Also, one other note: Lizzo built her brand on positivity and spreading kindness, and for her strong anti-body shaming messages. Now, a new lawsuit filed by several of her dancers show an entirely different and very ugly side of the superstar. We're going to discuss all that more this morning with attorney Robert Tarver, Barrington Salmon, and of course, Lauren Burke, the Capitol Hill and political reporter extraordinaire. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, let's start with the attorney. Break it down. I mean, we heard. Obviously, let's set this up because Benny Thompson and his committee, the January 6th committee, congressional committee, laid out a lot of things previous, and we all wondered if this day was going to ever come where it would land in court. It would land with the Department of Justice. But these 4 charges, they seem very intentional, because we were expecting also something along the lines of inciting an insurrection and things of that nature. But Attorney Tarver, tell us about why these are significant.
It's very significant because, as you said, everyone was expecting the incitement and a focus on January 6th. The incredible thing about this indictment is that it really speaks very little about January 6th. But what it does is it sets the scenario of how we got to the events of January the 6th. And the indictment really centers around the Electoral Count Act, because that is what the conspiracy is about. It's about those individuals who are involved in this particular indictment conspiring or agreeing together or acting together to undercut the Electoral Count Act, which is how we elect a president. And what makes this indictment so, I think, succinct and incredible is that the prosecution has painstakingly taken the time to speak to all of the individuals who gave Donald Trump advice. It lays out a scenario that he had received advice from everyone from the attorneys general to the attorneys that he hired to individual senior officials. And all of these people told him that there is not an issue with the election, that you lost. And yet he continued to move forward with all of these acts that were specifically meant to undercut the election. And the great thing about this document, I encourage everyone to read it, it focuses on 6 states and the actions that he and the other persons took in 6 states. Now, Donald Trump is the subject of this indictment. It's all about Donald Trump. But there are also co-conspirators who are named in this. They're not indicted in this particular indictment. They may be indicted somewhere else, or they may be indicted in the future. But in this one, this just lays out their conduct. And there's a specific reason for that, which we can get into a little bit later. But it's just an incredible document here from a legal perspective. And what you're going to find is if this thing does get to trial, you're going to see everyone from Vice President Mike Pence to attorneys general to probably Bill Barr to all of the Washington hierarchy in our government called to the witness stand to have to give testimony about their role and specifically what they told Donald Trump and what they saw Donald Trump do.
Yeah, Lauren, some of the co-conspirators, Rusty Bowers, Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, they all, according to Jack Smith, co-conspirators. In other words, they all played some sort of role. And we're talking about attorneys here, Lauren.
Yeah, 6 of the co-conspirators, or I should say 5 of the 6. We don't know who the 6th, we don't know who number 6 is, but 5 of the 6 are all attorneys. So at the very least, disbarment is probably on the table at some point. It already is for Rudy Giuliani. Mm-hmm. It will be interesting to see what happens with who gets called if this goes to trial. I'm not sure why the president would want to go to trial, although any sort of plea agreement would probably be scary enough to make him go to trial. And of course, that trial is likely to land sometime in the middle of next year, right during the primary season, depending, of course, on the position and scheduling of the 3 other cases. But really, this case is really a reflection of what we've already seen for the most part. There were a few surprises in there, but this is really the Benny Thompson January 6th hearing testimony, particularly as it pertains to the man you just mentioned, Bowers from Arizona. He testified, and that was testimony that was quite exhilarating. Here you had a sort of a Goldwater Republican saying, I was not going to break the law. It was clear to me that there was no, election violations, and I wasn't going to go along with it. But anyway, it does make me wonder a little bit about why we have a special prosecutor and why DOJ didn't prosecute this full out, but from Merrick Garland. But okay, now Jack Smith has 2 cases. He has the classified documents case in Florida, and now he has this. And of course, Donald Trump is entangled in several other cases. We shouldn't really forget E. Jean Carroll's case, obviously the Manhattan criminal case with Alvin Bragg. And of course, we have Fannie Willis in the background that is scheduled sort of or predicted to happen almost at any minute. So at any rate, you can see what the other side is messaging. They're effectively messaging something that sounds close to fascism in terms of ignoring the rule of law and disregarding the rule of law, which they're already doing in Alabama on the right. So I'm just saying, this is going to be a very, the tipping point of this is going to arrive, I think, pretty soon.
Yeah, well, Barrington, it seems that folks have been wondering, if the prosecutors here, if Jack Smith was going to really come down on Trump, and certainly he did. And Lauren mentioned the DOJ, Merrick Garland stepping aside and allowing for special counsel. But doesn't that give Biden some cover to say, hey, this is not politically motivated?
Yeah, it gives him cover, but it doesn't matter because he has some rabid dogs on the other side that are using every excuse that they can to justify what Orange Jumpsuit did. It doesn't matter, but it's interesting because I was watching some news, commentary yesterday, and Lawrence O'Donnell was saying that it was necessary for the January 6th committee to do this, lay it out the way it did, and that would be the background and the context by which these charges dropped. So it ties it all together. But I didn't think that this was going to happen because, you know, the truth of the matter is that those folks in the higher echelons of this country usually walk away from accountability. And it still amazes me that this dude is 77 years old, and this is the first time in his entire disgusting life that he's been held responsible and accountable for things that he's done.
Yeah, Attorney Tarver, Lauren mentioned a couple of surprises. Any surprises from your standpoint in this indictment?
Not really surprises per se. I was impressed with the depth of the interviews, because we have learned so much in this indictment about his staff, his legal counsel, all these people giving all of this advice leading up to January 6th. And not only that, we learned a lot about what these efforts were. I mean, this indictment is so detailed as to exactly what these individuals were doing. It's scary as to how close they came to making this thing happen. You have details about each contact that they had in Arizona, each contact that they had in Georgia, each contact that they had in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, all of those efforts. And all during that time, they were being told over and over again that this is not a fraud, outcome determinative fraud. So the reason why this indictment is so importantly detailed is that you heard them talking, and anyone who watched any of the media from Trump's attorneys last night, you heard them talking about, oh, this is free speech. It's really a free speech. Well, no, this is not a free speech claim. First and foremost, speech is one thing. Actions are another. And the beautiful thing about this indictment is it talks about his right to free speech from the very beginning. But then it goes on to detail actions that went far beyond just saying that I don't believe that this thing, fraud did not occur on the part of Donald Trump. It shows his actions in the face of all the information that told him. And what's important about that? It means that no, he never believed it. And then number two, if he did believe it, he's an absolute fool, and that's not a defense here. So either one of those things could be true, quite frankly. But it's pretty clear here. He didn't believe that there was fraud. He did this to remain in power, and that's what the indictment shows.
Listen, Attorney Tarver, let me stay with you for one moment, because I was watching Dan Abrams, who is ABC News' chief legal analyst, and he used to have the Dan Abrams show on MSNBC. I worked with him there, and he's, of course, he's a lawyer, and he was laying out a defense for Donald Trump. And what he laid out was really interesting, because we talked about these co-conspirators, and just about all of them are lawyers. And one of the things, and they're listed as co-conspirators for this reason, that they were also they were really inciting Trump's madness. They were pushing him, saying, yeah, we can do this and you can do this. And this is what happened in Georgia. This is what happened in Wisconsin. And these fake electors, well, they didn't use the term fake electors, right? And so Trump, according to Dan Abrams, could say, hey, on advice of counsel, I was only looking at this. I didn't tell him to commit crimes. I mean, what kind of defense?
Let me tell you about the advice of counsel defense. The advice of counsel defense means that you have to have sought and received information from counsel. You must meticulously follow that information, and it has to be done, most importantly, in good faith. And the reason why this is, again, this indictment is so detailed is it shows bad faith on the part of Donald Trump. You cannot consistently move forward with an agenda in the face of having your legitimate counsel tell you you can't do this. I mean, how many attorneys told him he shouldn't do this? He picked and chose the individuals that best suited his line of thought here. So you don't get to do that with the advice of counsel defense. And the reason why you see these individuals named as co-conspirators in this document is that if they are named as co-conspirators, you cannot use advice of counsel, because their actions are by virtue of being here, bad faith actions. So what Jack Smith did, and this is brilliant, he undercut the advice of counsel defense by naming each of the counsel who gave him that advice.
Lauren, for a long time, when something happened at the White House or with the president, it was always, something like a scandal of any sort. It was always compared to Nixon. This just totally blows Watergate out the water, if you will. But do you see a scenario, Lauren, where Donald Trump is going to prison?
I think that he could possibly. I think actually in all of these cases, the most threatening is probably Fannie Willis, because now do you get prison time for that? I don't know. He would, I guess, be considered a first-time offender. But remembering that all of these legal theories for a defense, freedom of speech has come up. Rudy Giuliani brought that up last night. Realize that a lot of what we're talking about is on video. The president of the United States encouraging a mob to attack the Capitol on the day of Biden's certification. A lot of what we're talking about is on audio. The president of the United States talking with Brad Raffensperger and the Georgia officials trying to, quote, find enough votes for him to win the election. The evidentiary part of this conversation or these cases is kind of fulfilled by Donald Trump running his mouth. So I think that means, okay, he's guilty, but is someone going to pull the ultimate trigger of putting him in jail? But you have to understand, of course, that the backstory to this entire thing is that our democracy is hanging in the balance, because Steve Bannon and Donald Trump and all of these people who are obsessed with Donald Trump and Donald Trump can do no wrong have effectively a message to everybody what they're going to do if he comes back into office. And of course, that includes dismantling our legal apparatus, the federal legal apparatus of the United States, including the FBI and anything else that would police criminality. And why? Because we elected the first Black president of the United States in 2008, and he served for 8 years without any tarnish. They took a very hard look at that for 8 years. They couldn't dismantle him. They created a bunch of media to try to lie and dismantle and amplify that somehow that was all, crazy or somehow fraudulent. Then, of course, Trump shows up and finally decides on the moment that Obama's leaving that he's going to run for president, which was all based on Obama being there in the first place. And so now their sort of fantasy of being superior has been smashed, not only by Barack Obama, but it's not lost on these people that we have 3 Black prosecutors involved and now a Black judge who was born in Jamaica involved in this story. This is the entire realization of the power of a minority group coming to the moment where they are, in fact, making decisions about people that they were never designed to make decisions about. And so they understand that backstory better than anybody. That is the field that they are fighting on. The question is, are the people who they're fighting against going to wake up? Because to this moment, other than Jack Smith, I don't see anybody who really understands what game this is. Of course, Jack Smith is never going to say that, but you can tell by the way he wrote this very tightly. He does understand that. I'm not sure that Anita Dunn and Joe Biden and some of these other people understand it. Clearly, Kamala Harris understands it, but that backstory is what we're playing up against. We're playing up against white supremacy, understanding that they're losing power, and this is the moment that they are absolutely losing that power. And Fannie Willis showing up is going to knock them, even further back into that realization. The question is, do we have enough people like George Will and, some of these never Trump conservative Republicans who have stated that Trump is crazy right from the bat? Do we have enough of those people to join with the Democrats and the people who realize Trump is crazy to stop them? Because they will need to be stopped. I'm from New York. I know where Trump is from. The ethos in New York is, I will do this until you stop me. And if you don't stop me, I will keep going.
Well, Barrington, so there's that 70, almost 80 charges. There's more coming from Georgia. There's been a civil conviction on a business fraud last year, a civil conviction on sexual assault this year. Letitia James has a $280 million civil trial coming up against Trump and his family for financial fraud, if you will. This is truly, it's shaping up to be the White House or prison, isn't it?
Oh, this dude is running for his life, bruh. He understands that if he doesn't win, he's out. He's done. And I chuckle because it's amusing to me to see him and all them idiots around him trying to justify what he's doing. It definitely he's running for his life. He's one of them honey badgers trapped in a corner, and that makes him that much more dangerous. I cannot say more clearly how important what Lauren said is. That is the backstory that we're running against. And I mean, just about every time that I come on here, I keep on talking about these weak, feckless, stupid Democrats who continue to play by the rules that governed politics in 1950, not understanding or not, I don't know, understanding, acknowledging, having awareness that this is the low intensity guerrilla warfare against Black people that is now broken out into open warfare. My wife, Mimi, she has a friend who, on the day that Barack Obama won election, she said, oh, hell, Black people are going to pay for this, for at least for the next generation. And she was right. Right after Obama came in, they created the Tea Party. They created all of these far-right, white domestic terror groups as a reflex to the election of a Black man into an office that they said no Black person should ever occupy. And everything that we're seeing is running off of that. And I hope, as Lauren said, that the people who are in positions of power and who are in positions to counter this wake up, because they're still sleeping. The ones who are animated, the ones who don't sleep, who are doing everything that they can out of what used to be the Republican Party. They understand that their power is that they're losing their power because of the browning of America. They see that they're going to become minorities, and they're doing everything and anything that they can to stay in power. And we still have people wringing their hands. We don't know what to do. I mean, the idea that you can have a criminal, and me and Stacey and I talk about this, an alleged criminal who has done all of this, and they're still saying, we don't know if we can do a mugshot. We don't know if we can do a perp walk. We don't know if you can put a president in prison. What the hell, really? And one of the things that we need to remember, I think Lauren, it was either Lauren or the attorney who said it. We were just a hair's breadth from losing everything in this country.
Well,
and it hasn't gone away.
yeah.
The threat is still there.
Attorney Tarver, let's talk about John Eastman, who's been identified as co-conspirator number 2. The indictment describes him as an attorney who devised and attempted to implement a strategy to leverage the vice president's ceremonial role overseeing the certification proceeding to obstruct the certification of the presidential election. In one specific instance, the indictment alleges that Trump and Eastman called RNC chairwoman Ronna McDaniel to ensure that the plan was in motion, and that during the call, Eastman told Ronna McDaniel that it was important for the RNC to help the defendant's campaign gather electors in targeted states, and falsely represented to her that such electors' votes would be used only if ongoing litigation in one of the states changed the results in Trump's favor. In her testimony before the January 6th committee, Ronna McDaniel said that Trump had called her, and he turned the call over to Eastman and then proceeded to talk about the importance of helping the campaign, quote, gather these contingent electors in case any of the legal challenges that were ongoing changed the results of any state. So you could see the conspiracy here, right?
Yeah, first and foremost, John Eastman is going to be the person that Trump relies on for his advice of counsel defense. But what is very clear from this indictment and from the statements that appear in this indictment is that John Eastman, he was so far out in terms of his theory. He joined with Ken Cheesebro, who was a New York attorney, and they not only put forward this outlandish theory, but they took actions to sustain it. Now, one of the things that is very clear here is that they had told these different people that all you have to do is go along with our scheme and idea and put forward this fake electors thing or this alternate state of electors. And they'll only be used if, for example, we're successful in the courts. Well, they were 0-32. They never got anywhere near a successful record. And they knew from the very beginning that no court would sustain it because Eastman even said that no court thus far has sustained any of this stuff. What's really fascinating here is you look and see how high this thing goes. Ron McDaniel was the head of the RNC,
Yes.
and she participated in this plan. So you know, from a political point, and look, I'm not a politician, I'm a lawyer, but from a political point, it bears on something that both Barrington and Lauren were saying. Strategically, they have been people from the progressive side and the left side have waited for the other side to come to their senses based upon these indictments. That's not going to happen. Everyone is baked in. So if your strategy is based upon people turning against Donald Trump, your strategy is misplaced because their belief and strength in Donald Trump is not based upon a true and rational belief that he is being persecuted. It is rooted in a number of ways in control of America, which is white supremacy.
Yeah, we keep using the word crazy, but co-conspirator number 3, Sidney Powell, Lauren, the indictment describes this co-conspirator as an attorney whose unfounded claims of election fraud Trump privately acknowledged to others sounded quote unquote crazy. Nonetheless, Trump embraced and publicly amplified this co-conspirator's disinformation, according to the indictment. So even Trump acknowledged that it was crazy.
Yeah, I think obviously their lying is their strategy. Lying is the strategy. Misinformation and disinformation is the strategy. And reason that's the strategy, of course, is that because it works. And if you can get away with it, you can almost pull something off. I mean, if thousands of people attack the U.S. Capitol based on a lie, well, why wouldn't we get them to be convinced that the election should be overturned in some way? I mean, we've had the polling data that has shown us that people do believe this, but I don't think that, again, these people have to be overtaken. Then, to Attorney Tarver's point, they're not coming to their senses. They're not waking up in the morning and going, we've had people in federal court. I think you guys have probably heard me mention that my boyfriend is a U.S. Capitol Police officer. He has been spoken to by the FBI. He has not testified yet, but him and his friends have all been spoken to by the FBI, and several of his friends have testified. Okay. They have had people in court who said in court that they totally believed that the election had been stolen, and that's why they attacked the Capitol. We're talking, airhead level individuals, but whether they're airheads or not, that's what they believed and they acted on it. So this thing of the disinformation piece, the misinformation piece, the media piece in this is absolutely huge, alongside the fact that they want to believe that because, of course, they want Donald Trump in office. I mean, Donald Trump was born in 1946. And, I think I'm correct in saying that blacks in the South were still using the Green Book in 1946. They do not want to see black people in charge of stuff. That's what this is about. That's what this is really about. That's the silent part that MSNBC and CNN are not going to say out loud. But that's what this is. And Trump, when he would get up there, every now and then he would say at a campaign speech, this is your last chance, to a completely white audience. This is your last chance. I am your last chance. He is an avatar for white people being in control. The narrative he gives, of course, that's not accurate. If we look at the stats, we see that white people are still in control, but that's what he believes, and he's trying to get other people.
Slogan.
So,
It's
so
a
in this
slogan.
document, I
I'm
was just going
sorry,
to say,
Lauren, but it's that slogan is gonna. It seems to be working on some fronts, though, right? That
oh, it
it's
works
not.
on
They're
some
not.
fronts.
Yeah,
It works on some fronts because it is a integral part of American history and has been for
yeah.
400 years. So of course that's going to work. That goes back to everything that the country was founded on in 1619 in terms of blacks being inferior. They're not supposed to be in charge of things. They're not supposed to be making decisions. So if you were born in 1946, and even John Eastman, he was born in 1960. I mean, these people grew up never seeing anybody black in charge of anything. And now they have black judges and black prosecutors deciding their fate. It is a moment for them. Again, I doubt that they'll ever be in any conversation where they ever admit that, although Donald Trump has been pretty clear about admitting that. But that is what is at stake. The question is, how many people are going to play the role of aggressively fighting against that? Because there are people who may not be Republicans, but have no problem with the idea of, oh, white people are going to be in charge of making decisions. Okay, that's fine. They're fine with that. So that group is a little bit dangerous. I think they are overtaken, frankly, by a younger group of white folks out there that wants no part of this. We also saw 2020, not 2020, 2022, people like Carrie Lake, who's certifiably crazy, losing. And that's that Trump wing. So I do think there's enough white folks out there to fight against this, but we did see the Capitol get attacked by thousands of people. So you gotta really process all of that.
Yeah, let me just say this right quick. We often and appreciate the feedback we get from the viewers, like Angela Connolly, Power 96, Mike V, et cetera, et cetera. Mary Hostad, if you can articulate anything sensible, I'll be happy to read it on air. But this attack against Angela and our viewers is unacceptable. But it also shows that many times when we do get Trump supporters watching, this is what happens. And this is why you guys stay on Fox News. Now that I've said that, let's talk about, if you will, Jeffrey Clark, a Trump appointee with the Department of Justice, who's also listed as a co-conspirator. He was named acting head of Justice Department's Civil Division, and according to the indictment, he secretly met with Trump several times in the run-up to January 6th. He tried to coerce the acting Attorney General and acting Deputy Attorney General to sign a draft letter and other false claims that the Justice Department had identified significant concerns that may have impacted the outcome of the election in multiple states. So this thing rises up even to the level of the Department of Justice. Thus, Attorney Tarver, a special counsel needed to be involved in this, right?
Yeah, this is how close we came to an incredibly dangerous situation. Now, this is the focus, because the idea was to have the Department of Justice weigh in and say, oh, there's fraud going on here, and therefore you cannot trust this election. And that would have been a complete disaster, because if you have the Department of Justice, you have the whole game at that point. And that's why they wanted to put Clark in, because the other members of the Department of Justice were not going to go along with this. If they put Clark in, Clark would have declared the election results corrupt, and then that would have been the predicate for invoking the Insurrection Act. And the Insurrection Act allows you to call in the military to quell any of the issues, to seize voting machines, and to do whatever you need to do to be able to lock this thing down. So all they had to do was to put Clark in that position, and they came perilously close. Clark was ready to go. It didn't happen, and thankfully it didn't happen, because we would be in a whole different ballgame right now if it had.
Yeah.
Barrington, the judge, District Judge Tanya, and you got to correct me on the last name, Chutkan. Okay, she's been assigned to proceed over the criminal case. Your thoughts, and I'm gonna give you a little backdrop, because she's Jamaican, she's black, right? Fonnie Willis is black. The district attorney in New York, he's black. You see the thing, Letitia James, the attorney general up in New York, is black, a black woman. This judge. Donald Trump, Barrington, as you well know, throughout his reign of throughout his reign
Of terror,
has
you can say it. His reign of
has
terror. You can say it.
of terror. Okay, has I mean, viciously attacked not just African Americans and other minorities, but particularly Black women. Um, this is what they would call poetic justice, right?
Hey, in Jamaica, they always say God not sleep, and God has jokes. God have a whole bunch of jokes because it is ironic to me to see that most of the folks that are dropping the hammer are the people that he hates and despises the most. So that is most satisfying to me. And I often wonder why he has been allowed to. He has threatened Jack Smith's family. He's threatened Alvin Bragg and his family. The types of dirty, vile things that he said about these people, and it's okay. There's no checks, no balance. They talk about free speech and all this stuff. And I mean, I think they were saying that they had to double or triple the amount of security that Alvin Bragg and the staff and the DA staff in New York have. That's
Racist hate mail.
Say it again.
Bonnie's getting racist hate mail. We reported on that just yesterday. The latest, they called her a communist, N-word whore.
Yeah.
And so it just continues to amaze that when someone's on trial, Attorney Tarver, I mean, I'm pretty sure you advise your clients not to incite the judge, not to incite the district attorney, not to incite the jury.
Yeah, in most cases, look, it can draw you bad consequences. Judge can take action against you. He could sanction you. He could gag you in a number of ways by saying you can't talk about the case. These judges have chosen not to do this thus far. And I understand their reasoning because, if you look at the bigger picture of getting to where you're going to get to, there is kind of a strategy here, which is not to deal with the small things, but to let this thing play out to get to its larger picture. And in a number of ways, you give a person like Donald Trump more fodder if you try to shut him down, because that then becomes a part of the free speech narrative. And that's not what this whole thing is about. It's about really getting to the facts of the case and moving the thing forward. And that's why this most recent indictment is most important, because this is the one that's going to move forward undeterred. There are not a whole lot of factual issues here outside of what you see in this indictment. The interviews are what they are. And look, Department of Justice does not put something in an indictment. U.S. Attorney's Office does not put something in an indictment that they can't prove. That's just the way that this works. If they don't have the evidence, if they don't have the backup, they're not putting it in an indictment. That means that all of these things you see in this document are sustained by likely tape recorded audio or visual substantiation recordings of these people saying that. And I'm just going to read. I was thumbing through this because I wanted to find something that really sums up what was happening here and what they were thinking on this team. And if you go to paragraph 25, for anybody who's looking at this thing, you've got a Trump senior advisor. Senior advisor writes in an email, when our research and campaign legal team can't back up any of the claims made by our so-called elite strike force legal team, you can see why we're 0-32 in cases. And then he goes on to say, I'll obviously hustle to help on all fronts, but it's tough to own any of this when it's all just conspiracy SHIT beamed down from the mothership. So this is the kind of advice that Donald Trump was getting. He was being told that this is nonsense. It's conspiracy nonsense. And yet he continued to move forward, took actions to completely go against everything that any legitimate person said. Now, if I sit here and I tell you, Stacey, and everyone else is on this panel, that the sky is actually green, when you can see, and all legitimate people can see that it's blue, if I persist in saying that it's green, okay, I might be crazy. But if I take actions based upon that sky being green, for example, nuclear actions or something else, then that's not legitimate. That's not good faith. That's my own agenda. And that's what this indictment is going to seek to prove in a court of law.
Attorney Tarver, he's also charged under a civil rights law that's used to prosecute the KKK. You laugh.
Right. Yeah, conspiracy, right. I laugh because there's such irony here. that this man who has been such a racist and has conducted himself in such a race-based manner all through his pre-presidential career and his presidential career is now being prosecuted under a statute which was meant to vindicate the rights of African Americans. This conspiracy of rights charge is the charge that carries with it actually the most amount of time. 10 years for the violation of that. And it basically says, like, we as American citizens had the right to vote. He specifically stood in the way of and conspired with others to take that right away from us. Something that has been historically happening to African Americans. They didn't name African Americans here, black people. They're naming all Americans. But historically, that's who it was meant to redress. And now this thing has come back to really bite him in the butt.
Lauren, Kenneth Anthony is writing in that this is a distraction from Biden's treason, alleged treason, nothing more. And you hear a lot of folks on that side of the aisle say it is a distraction from the alleged crimes of Joe and Hunter Biden. That situation has been unfolding too. I mean, is there any correlation there at all?
There are no alleged crimes of Hunter Biden or Joe Biden, other than Hunter Biden's complication that I suspect has nothing to do with what the questioner is referring to. The Republicans, one of their major strategies is distraction and sort of a look at the squirrel. They did it with Benghazi to the tune of millions of dollars with regard to Hillary Clinton, and that turned out to be a big nothing. And as I think most people know, Joe Biden has been in public life since the early 1970s. The Republicans are trying to create something in Congress where they can bring up impeachment proceedings. You were dealing with a party that is looking to dismantle and usurp the authority of the federal government. And if they have to lie to do it, they'll lie to do it. They'll lie to do anything to keep power. They'll lie to do anything to keep Donald Trump in power. So there are no facts and evidence with regard to Joe Biden doing anything illegal. But that doesn't matter to these MAGA Republicans who have based lying they've based their entire strategy on lying and getting a certain percentage of the public to believe they're lying. Their lying is one of the biggest problems that we face. It's one of the reasons why the press plays an integral role in this moment in trying to delineate what the truth is. And the press failure here is massive. But it's also joined by a bunch of people who are in the, quote, media, in fact, quotes, who are also lying alongside the right-wing actors who want to maintain power. So the only question left really is whether or not how far the MAGA Republican wing of the Republican Party is going to go to usurp the authority of the federal government, to usurp the authority of the FBI, who they're seeking to destroy and dismantle, because it holds them accountable, and who is going to stop them? Those are the questions that we have to answer because we already know what they're going to do. They've said what they're going to do repeatedly. The only question left is what we're going to do to answer what they're doing.
Yeah. So before we move on to Lizzo, I want to get everybody's thoughts. Where is this ending? Where is this going to wind up? Barrington, will Trump go to jail? Well, I guess we could start with A, will he be convicted of any of these crimes? B, will he go to jail? And C, will he be back in the White House next year?
I think he'll be convicted. It's still unclear to me based on the different these folks that are out there, the ones that Lauren's talking about, who need to counter what's going on. They're still too deferential to a criminal, a liar, a con man, and a thief. They're still too deferential. Oh, he was a president. There's certain things we can't do. I think he's going to get convicted. I'm not sure which one. And Attorney Calvert, which one of these cases would ensure that he would not be allowed to run for re-election? Are there any here?
None of them.
None of them. Yeah.
None of them.
So that's a problem, because as has been said, they're gonna do as much. Lauren said it. They're gonna do as much as they can until they get caught, and it makes wait. So Congress would have to do that. Would have to decide that he couldn't run for re-election. Is that correct?
Lauren,
People
is that is that how that works?
be able to do that.
I don't think so. Because it's a constitutional question we've never dealt with.
Mhm.
That is going to be very complicated. I'm not
Yeah.
sure anything would stop him, of course, from filing and running.
Yeah,
Is the short answer. He's going to be running for president.
yeah, that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, he has a trial date for the Florida, the cases out of Florida, the federal cases out of Florida for May of next year, and obviously they'll soon set a date for this. There'll be a date for the New York cases, and then of course there's Georgia. The question becomes, will he have time to run?
Oh, he'll find time. The thing for me is that the only positive part about this whole thing for me that doesn't scare the hell out of me is the moves and the movement and the direction of voters in 2022. Because, and to tell you how foolish Democratic consultants are, they told Biden, don't talk about the fact that what the Republicans are doing is a threat to democracy, that it wouldn't be something that would gain any traction. So he should basically tell them to give him their money back, because that's what they said saved the election. That people were so concerned about the various anti-democratic things that the Republicans were doing that they voted to ensure that this country would stay intact. And
Real quick, then, Lauren, if you're a Democrat, what do you do knowing that Trump is by far and away the front runner on the Republican side, and of course, Biden is the front runner on the Democratic side, and it's inevitable that they're going to face off. How do you, if you're a Democrat, how do you attack this?
Well, they do have to. I think they're doing it already to some extent. They have to amplify what they've typically amplified, which they amplified last year. That this guy is fixing to end our democracy. He tried to steal your votes, and he's a liar and a fraud. I mean, you do have to keep pumping that. That worked last year, by the way. If you looked at the MAGA Republicans who ran, that worked. That message worked.
Yeah.
Now you're playing on a different playing field, obviously, with the electoral map. The electoral math is different than any one state, as everybody knows. But that's the message. The problem is that they're running an 81-year-old, and he is showing his age. And as somebody who's been the youngest member of the family for most of my life, I know exactly what that looks like, and I'm seeing that in Joe Biden. It just happens to coincide with Biden, who of course is of good character and all that, but he's 81, and that is a tension there that I think everybody has to be very, I'm not saying we should switch Biden out. I'm not going into any of that. We just have to be aware. We just have to be aware of that. And we have these third-party actors that are clearly strategizing to shave off the 8 million votes that Biden had over Trump back in 2020.
Cornel West, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Right. That's all a disaster. Yeah. That's all.
Attorney Tarver, where does this end in your mind? Where does this end?
Well, to get back to your
how does it end? I should say.
Here's my quick read on this. I'm concerned about the Florida case because it only takes one juror to scuttle the entire thing. One juror has to say it's not so. And quite frankly, people come into these things agendized. I don't trust Florida. I don't trust that jury pool, given what the composition is. So I'm concerned about that case. Finally, Willis, hey, she could come up with a really nice indictment, but the fact of the matter is that Georgia has undercut her by putting into law regulations that say that they can take away her movement as a prosecutor. So I'm not really confident in that one. This most recent case, I am most confident in because it is in D.C. and it is before a judge who has trial experience, and it is before a judge who can move a case along at a more favorable district. So I do have more confidence in that. But ultimately, what's really crazy is the case that probably has the strongest legs is the Stormy Daniels case with Alvin Bragg, which quite frankly is misdemeanors and probably wouldn't draw any jail time. So look, the one in DC would likely draw jail time because, as I've said before, it's not just what's in the indictment and what he did, but a federal judge must take into account relevant conduct that is not even adjudicated. So all of the things that all of these other people have brought, that's relevant conduct, and that can come into play to decide exactly what his sentence would be. So I do think he would end up with jail time here if convicted.
Well, we will see. Now, Moving on to Lizzo, who built her empire, her entire brand off positivity and spreading kindness, but a stunning lawsuit says it was all a facade, that she, among other things, fat shamed and body shamed her dancers. Specific claims made against Lizzo and her dance captain, Charlene Quigley, in a lawsuit filed by her ex-dancers say, as far as Lizzo is concerned, she's accused of overworking dancers and making the group re-audition in an excruciating 12-hour rehearsal. Those she was dissatisfied with would be fired and sent home. She's accused of firing a dancer for challenging her claim that the group was drinking before performances. She's accused of making a quote unquote thinly veiled comment relating to a dancer's weight gain, and later firing her for recording a meeting while suffering an eye condition. She's also accused of coercing a dancer into touching a woman's breast at a strip club, despite the dancer opposition to that. Lizzo is also accused of inviting her dancers to a nude cabaret bar without disclosing the specifics of the performance. She's also accused of making her dancers eat a banana from a stripper's private parts. Um, and it goes on and on. She's accused of scolding. Well, the other individual here, her Quigley, is accused of scolding the dancers for having premarital sex, and accused of unwarrantedly discussing masturbation and sexual fantasies with the group. I mean, Lauren, what in the world is going on? This is Lizzo we're talking about.
Well, allegedly, you have to remember that what is put in a court filing, a court complaint, is shielded from defamation. So people can put anything in a court filing and a court complaint, and often that's exactly what they do. We sure as hell saw that with Chris Brown and Trey Songz last year, who were accused of sex crimes, and it was all a bunch of BS. Also with Snoop Dogg on right before the Super Bowl, if you remember, and that was BS. So, I'm a big believer, as somebody who was the communications director for Justin Fairfax in 2019. And I saw a bunch of not in evidence information on Twitter. Now, at least this is a court filing, so it's going to be subject to some sort of analytical moment here. But I have come to believe nothing. As the daughter of a law enforcement officer in New York, I've come to believe nothing until I see evidence, and particularly when it involves Black people. So I don't care what some attorney said in the paper, in some statement. Shout out to Nancy Erica Smith, who thinks that somehow you can call somebody a rapist on Twitter, and that somehow makes it true. I believe nothing. So I do think Lizzo is an extremely talented singer. This is an extremely ironic moment because of her positioning as someone who has been against fat shaming, if any of it is true. But what I've learned is that when people have a lot of money around, or when people have power, it makes them the target of a lot of nonsense. I forget the guy's name who's the quarterback in Cleveland, but that's another example. So I can go on and on with examples, and unfortunately I've had to study them after 2019 and what happened in Virginia. This is a world where, again, back to Trump, lying works, sensationalism works, whatever gets clicks to these websites that these news organizations make money off works. Lizzo is the perfect target for something like that. But yeah, it would be nice to see team anti-fat shame in this moment say a few things, right? If any of this
we
is
haven't heard
I'll
from
wait.
Lizzo yet
I'll
on
wait till
this.
we get to the evidentiary piece before fully commenting on this.
Attorney Tarver, if someone comes to you, Lizzo's dancers, for instance, well, I mean, what goes into an attorney putting this together? I mean, at this stage, you're just going on their word, right?
Well, for the most part, you shouldn't just be going on their word. You should be looking for some material evidence that justifies the word, because the fact of the matter is, if I put something in a complaint I'm unable to sustain, then if I'm an ethical lawyer, I've got some problems. Now, there are a lot of lawyers who will just take any case because in many situations and scenarios, they believe that they can force persons who have a high profile and are well financed into settlement posture
Exactly.
just by making the charge. And I've seen that over and over and over again in some of the higher profile people that I have represented. So just because someone does put something in a lawsuit, as has been said, does not necessarily make it true. But there's a lot of things that you have to really consider with these types of lawsuits with entertainers, because part of what comes out here is what is the culture that they're thriving in. And so the culture in, for example, a Wall Street investment firm, it's going to be different than the culture that you're asked to interact in a entertainment vein. And all of that will become very relevant as to your conduct, whether or not the conduct is appropriate or inappropriate. Look, sexual harassment is always inappropriate if it happens, no matter where it happens. But in terms of some of the things that are being said, conversations and things of that nature, well, depending on what happens with the environment, if you're in an entertainment environment where people are always, as happens now in our culture, discussing sexuality in their music, it's difficult to then claim that there is a problem with the discussion of sexuality outside of that when that becomes a large part of your being in that particular genre.
And Attorney Tarver, what about non-disclosure agreements? Most, if not all of these, particularly high profile, someone like Lizzo, I'm sure these dancers had a non-disclosure agreement.
Yeah, NDAs or non-disclosure agreements prevent an individual from disclosing certain, we call it proprietary information or private information that goes on during the course and in the course of their employment. However, an NDA cannot protect an individual from disclosing criminal conduct. So if there is criminal conduct, if there is illegal conduct, then that NDA will fall by the wayside. You can't use an NDA to hide conduct that's illegal.
Barrington, as Lauren articulated, we've seen a lot of instances of people making claims that they haven't necessarily backed up.
Yeah, I there's not much that I can add to what Lauren and the attorney said. I take all that with a grain of salt, and a lot of times, if it bleeds, it leads, and sensationalism works. So I'm skeptical, and I want to wait until things move further legally to see how they shake out.
And we just saw what happened with Kevin Spacey. See, the name of the game, and I'd love to hear Attorney Tarver talk more of this. The name of the game when you have a multimillionaire defendant is, I'm going to try to get you to settle. I'm going to write in that complaint what I need to write to get you to settle, and I'm going to embarrass you publicly and damage your reputation so you'll give me $1 or $2 million to shut up. And I think, I haven't read the thing yet, but just reading the excerpts, even though her music does deal with sexuality and she twerks and all that stuff, that's going to complicate a lot of what they're trying to allege here. But at any rate, the goal typically of everyone involved is to get that person with that money to settle as quickly as possible and walk away. Whether true or not.
The way that process works is there's the first contact by the attorney to her attorneys, a discussion like, hey, this is what we've got here. We're prepared to move forward. If you want to talk about whatever, then we can talk about whatever. If that doesn't work, then that's when the lawsuit is usually filed. And then there's discussion about that. But the problem is, for those types of attorneys who do file those suits just for those reasons, is that once the information is out, you lose your leverage. So if you were going to try to get and extract something, it's already out there. So now we're into the proof portions of this. And if they're able to prove something, all well and good. But if they're not, there's a new trend where these entertainers and other people, and it's not limited to entertainers, but people are starting to counterclaim, and
Right.
They claim in reverse against the person who's filed against them for specifically trying to interfere with their business. and trying to have them lose revenue and things of that nature. Those are viable claims in every jurisdiction.
Why haven't we seen more of that? Well, maybe now we are starting to see that, right? But it seems like we haven't really seen a whole lot of that, of these
Well,
the counter
let me
claims.
let me answer that, because typically the people you would be suing are knuckleheads with no money, so you can't recover the damage. Okay, so Lizzo is probably suing people who have no money.
Well, you see what happened,
I get the
Lauren.
question all the time with regard to Justin Fairfax. Well, why didn't he sue the women? Well, you know, he can never get back the damage that they caused him, the millions of dollars in damage. They get to say whatever they want. It gets platformed on CBS. Nobody checks whether or not it's true. Nobody cares. The press is protected by the First Amendment, as it should be. But the reason that Time Sullivan is about to be repealed by this conservative Supreme Court is that the media is making money off this sensationalism. And that those two cases we saw with Chris Brown and Trey Songz last year, where you had an attorney file that they had allegedly raped somebody, you cannot tell me that that wasn't designed to get those two guys to just give that person some money. She was a Jane Doe, so she had no risk. She wasn't even permanent. She wasn't even public.
We did
Jane Doe
see,
lawsuit,
yeah,
and they get their reputations damaged, and they can't recover what they lost.
yeah,
That's why they don't sue.
we did see Cardi B sue Tasha K, right? And not only sue, but win a multi-million-dollar settlement. And not only that, we have seen Cardi B relentlessly go after this this blogger for, I mean, now she's summoning the blogger and her husband to court to get financial records. I mean, she has not let up. So maybe Attorney Tarver, maybe Barrington, we need to see more of that to kind of maybe stop this a little bit.
Well, I will tell you how I have stopped it in several cases. And that is the federal law says that if you attempt to extort something from someone, it is a crime. In other words, if you threaten to expose a violation of law, then that's a crime. And every state has its own extortion type statutes. And so we have been very successful in going to the prosecutors of those states and saying, this is a claim that we believe is extortion. And if we can show at least there's a predicate for that, then maybe we'll begin an investigation into those people. So, you know, I've been very proactive with that in the defense of my clients with those types of actions, because you can't get your reputation back.
Right.
Once that thing is out there, you are destroyed. And that changes your entire life. It changes your family's life. It has broken up marriages. It has estranged children from their fathers and mothers. This is serious stuff. It's not a game. So, you know, you have to be very strong about that. And that's why we also, as we sit here, have to be very careful talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let me tell you something. There is an effort to, I mean, I think it comes under extortion as well, but I think it's very difficult to prosecute an attorney for filing a case.
Yeah.
I think that that's all but impossible. You can allege anything and you're shielded from defamation. What is interesting to me is that news organizations, because of course they're shielded from defamation by simply quoting the case, which is shielded from defamation. So they will just put anything, whether it's true or not, nobody cares. The only thing people care about is the making of money and the clicks to a website. And everyone is getting that with these types of sensational cases, whether it's Lizzo, whether it's Kevin Spacey, whether it's Johnny Depp. That train is running. The Washington Post puts an editorial from Amber Heard that is really written by the ACLU in the paper of a bunch of things that are not facts and evidence, and nobody cares because everybody's making money off of it and reputations are destroyed. And that example you gave, Stacey, that is a multimillionaire entertainer who has the recourse, the attorneys to sue that individual that doesn't have that much money to get that bit of reputation back. What's more dangerous is when somebody who has no money alleges something that doesn't have any evidence, destroys somebody's reputation,
right,
and that person whose reputation is destroyed has no recourse to get back what they lost.
Oh, absolutely. No, totally. I totally get it. And totally thanks for breaking that down. You guys, Barrington's like, look, it is what it is.
No. My thing is like if somebody sues someone and it's found to be a lie, hammer them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hammer them, make them pay.
Yeah.
even if you're not going to get any money back.
You have to understand, to do that, you're paying money. So now
Yeah.
you're hiring a defamation attorney, or you're hiring attorney Tarver,
Yeah.
who should be very expensive because he has to spend all of his time researching your case, knowing all the facts, arguing that in court. That is expensive. So now you're expending money
Yeah.
to try to get your reputation back. And I'm telling you, Time Sullivan is going to go. The malice standard is part of the reason why this happens. You'll notice that these news organizations love to target elected officials because they know the elected officials have no recourse in court.
But what also makes it difficult, Stacey, just as a final line, is
Yes.
you don't want to get to the point where you chill people from making true and effective and truthful lawsuits. So if there's a punishment to be gained by having a truthful lawsuit, but not being able to be successful for that lawsuit, that's a danger too. And so we've got to balance it out.
So there's a lot of layers there. But thank you guys again for breaking it down. We've gone overtime. Appreciate Lauren Burke, of course, Barrington,
Yes, sir.
Salmon, and the one and only attorney from New Jersey, Robert Tarver. Thanks so much. Thank you all for joining Let It Be Known. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks.